Hi, everybody. I'm Leslee Michelsen, the Curator of Collections and Exhibitions here at the Shangri Museum of Islamic Art, Culture, and Design in Honolulu, Hawaii. And I'm joined today by my colleague, Navid Najafi.
Hello, everybody. Aloha. I'm Navid Najafi, the new Learning Programs Coordinator at the Shangri-La Museum.
And today we're going to be continuing our discussion about Islamic glass. And we have chosen this object to begin our conversation, right?
Right. So I'm pretty new to the collection here. And so Leslee tasked me with the responsibility of picking out some pieces of glass to talk about. And so I just had a few questions I wanted to ask about this really intriguing piece that caught my eye. First of all, what is it?
Right, well, good question. That's a really great first question. And so it's a bottle is the short answer, but we actually know a little bit more than that because of this really distinctive shape. So you see this really low kind of oval, which is a little bit flattened on the side, and then this much longer tapered neck. That tells us that evaporation is a concern for whatever the liquid contents are in this bottle. And usually when you're dealing with, contents for which losing some of it is a grave concern, it's something quite high value.
Right.
So it's probably for perfume, or most likely this is a rosewater sprinkler. So it's designed to hold a sensitive liquid and to be dispensed onto the hands of people, guests coming to your home. So it's giving people cleanliness. I mean, it's effectively sanitizing your hands, right? As well as perfuming them.
Wow. Okay. What about the construction and some of the materials used?
Originally, this would have been a really light yellow, almost clear glass. And you can see that if you look on this side of it, where some of this very opaque layer, we call this weathering, has worn away. And you can see the original glass there. So this is glass, and it's a mouth-blown glass. And then it would have been tooled. So it would have been additionally worked while the glass was still warm. And you can see some of the layers of decoration on this object. You can see some of the bands here and some of these, this whole register of kind of vegetation, and we have some rings here. And there's a bit of an inscription, or let me say what looks like part of an inscription, but it's so heavily obscured by this coating that it's really hard to see. What we have here are bands of enamel. So just enamel like we're used to today, right? But the really special thing about enamel is that each color, of course, has a different chemical composition. So it has to be fixed individually.
Wow.
So you have to fix each one individually and then put it back in the kiln, And of course, with a glass object, as you heat it, it's not like ceramic where you heat it once and it's fixed, right? So the object can get really soft again.
Right.
So it's obviously a really highly skilled glassworker who's enameling this glass. And it's a very popular, common, shall we say, form of ornament in this period. So this is the Mamluk period. This is the 14th century, roughly, in what's today Egypt.
Wow.
And the Mamluks and their predecessors, the Ayyubids, who are mostly in Syria, from the 12th and 13th century, the Ayyubids and the Mamluks really perfected this technique. And we actually have quite a few enameled objects from this period of time. We have beakers, we have vases, lots of cups, and rosewater sprinklers.
Wow. So you answered my most important question of where it's from.
Oh, right. Sorry.
Who made it. No, that's great. So what is it called?
Well, I've heard them called om-oms before, but that's a really good question. I don't actually know the precise terminology for this object. But I will tell you that the interesting thing is that we actually don't see this particular technique a lot after the Mamluks leave power in the early 16th century. So it really is a really special thing at a certain time and place. And it's a couple hundred years, the Ayyubids and the Mamluks and modern day Egypt and Syria, but it is really distinctive from this time and place. And of course, we also know what's happening in the Middle East at this time. There are a lot of, the Crusades, are happening certainly in the Ayyubid period. And so there's a lot of circulation of materials, like there's a lot of circulation of imagery back and forth between Europe and the Middle East as well. Some of that appears on some of these objects. And unfortunately, we can't talk a lot about the ornamentation of this object because it is so covered.
Right.
And when you have this coating it's a chemical reaction, okay? And it's basically alkalis being leached out of the glass, usually by water, but it's often found in excavated glass, right? And this coating becomes an integral part of the glass. Like you can't clean that off. right? If you do, you take away the structural integrity of the glass.
Right.
So what you do is, and you can even see how some of the flakes are coming off on the table here. So what you do is consolidate it. So the conservator will work to stick those down effectively to keep it as whole as possible. Because every time, I mean, honestly, every time you handle this glass with this weathering, you're damaging it.
Wow.
So I'm actually damaging it right now. So I'm going to put it down. So
very delicate piece.
It's very delicate.
But for the benefit of education.
Absolutely.
It's important. So
Absolutely.
Last question.
Sure.
How did this piece come into our collection?
That is always a really, really wonderful question to ask. So this piece was actually purchased at auction, right? So we know that it was bought in the 1950s at an auction house called Park Burnett, which was now part of Sotheby's in New York. And I think that also speaks to, the real collectability of this kind of glass. Again, this iconography is obscured, but some of the enameled glass has really beautiful inscriptions. Some of them have figural scenes on them. Some of them have what we call blazons, which are effectively like Mamluk coats of arms, right? So they're often really attractive, visually attractive objects. And so you can see how European and American collectors, among others, would be really drawn to these objects. So it's the kind of thing that you would expect to see at an auction. It's not the kind of thing you're going to pick up in a little shop when you're traveling through Egypt. This is also important to talk about like audience, because this is not a courtly object. This would have been made, you could have bought this in a market, in Egypt or Syria in the Mamluk period, and it would have been made for the middle classes, really. So it's something that I can't say the average person, but this is not an exquisitely expensive object that only the court could afford. You or I could have had something like this.
Wow, amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I definitely learned a lot about this object.
Sure.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, pleasure. Thanks.